Man, Aaron, I don't even know what to say. I don't think I've ever been this uncomfortable on the air when we're talking about hunting and fishing. Man, so uncomfortable.
Well, yeah, I guess the thing to say there is that uncomfortable is good. Like that's the one thing everybody seems to push from these days is being uncomfortable. But man, getting comfortable in uncomfortable, boy, that's such a good thing to practice.
Absolutely, and especially the things we work in every day. Because, as our friend Travis Thompson always says, conservation isn't convenient, and quite often it's not real comfortable to have these conversations. And our guest today, I listened to him not long ago give us a speech about getting uncomfortable in order to get new people involved, and in order to keep challenging ourselves to become better sportsmen and better human beings.
Yeah, and this was a cool one because he touched on so many different things. A veteran in the military who was serving during 9/11. We talked about that, and the way that kind of made him think and altered his trajectory. How that got him eventually into being a kayak fisherman and a TV personality and all those things, and kind of where he is now and how he's thinking of things. And we didn't get all the way there on conservation as much as we do sometimes, but all these background stories are really what makes good conservationists. And you can tell he's just passionate and into what he's thinking about. And, so we should say today we had on Chad Hoover, and he has he's a TV personality, has a company, I guess. What's the company's kayak bass fish? I can't. He said the
kayak
other
bass fish.
Yeah, he said the other guy, so then I was confused. So anyway, yeah, he's a guy who does a lot of obviously fishing from kayaks, and is really pushing that out there as a way to get on the water better. And we talked about so many other things in life on this one, maybe even more than that, but I think folks are going to enjoy this one. It was entertaining and fascinating, and obviously a good guy who cares a lot. So have a listen to Chad Hoover.
Since 1936, the National Wildlife Federation has worked with hunters and anglers to pass the most important conservation laws in American history and to protect our sporting traditions. This podcast explores our history, our values, and the work we do to safeguard the fish and wildlife that fuel our passions. We are NWF Outdoors.
Howdy, folks, and welcome to the NWF Outdoors podcast. We've been on a semi-hiatus, at least a hiatus from Bill and I getting on here together and talking. We've done some field stuff, and hopefully folks are liking the different kinds of content we're bringing, but we're back to our normal format today. How you been, Bill? Haven't talked to you in a bit.
It has been a while. Good to be back with you on the air. Been just like you, in the field a ton here lately, and man, so much going on. So it's exciting. This time of year for sportsmen anyway is exciting. Fishing's getting better, hunting's getting better. It's all good. So,
yes, sir. And we're gonna have a good one today. When you've been talking to me about this one, I've been really excited to hear from this fella and just some of his stories. And we'll start with just letting you introduce him so we don't leave him hanging there while we just chat back and forth.
all good, Aaron. Yeah, last month I was at an event, and our guest today was speaking, and some things he touched on, I thought, man, what a great podcast opportunity. And Chad Hoover, a lot of people are going to recognize him as the man who really was the big push behind kayak bass fishing and the growth of kayak fishing in general. But Chad grew up in the South, hunting and fishing. I mean, he did it all. And then he had a 20-year naval career, and that just exposed him to so many different locales and outdoor experiences and that sort of thing. And while he was in the midst of that career, he got involved with kayak fishing. And even while in the Navy, he started, kayak bass fishing as a business and a media career. I mean, he wrote a book on it. He started tournaments and that sort of thing. So, Chad Hoover, welcome to the podcast. There's so much I can't even cover it in a paragraph. So,
well, Bill, thanks for having me, guys. I appreciate it. And you talked about that in the field thing. Yesterday, we we were going to try to do the podcast the first time, and Bill sends us this video of him out there fighting a Jack Crevalle that's stripping drag off like he's like it stole something, and that was his consolation. Yeah, guys, I'm sorry. This is my penance of why I'm not able to make it to the podcast. I'm having to deal with all this drag burning out here. So, yeah, if that's your idea of penance, then I need to hang out with you more often, because that was good.
That was Bill's technical difficulties.
Yeah, I'm having technical difficulties getting these fish to stop smashing this topwater. So,
But I had to grab the rail to keep from going over the gunwale of the boat. That was kind of the penance part. It is embarrassing when you have to grab hold just to keep a 25-pound fish from pulling you out of the boat.
Yeah, it would have made a great fail video, though, you know what I mean, for social media if it actually dragged you out of the boat,
Yeah, I'd have been hovering my finger over the button to post that one, Bill.
Yeah.
But Aaron, next time we'll set it up for you.
Okay, perfect. Well, let's talk about what we've been doing outside like we always do. Besides that, or Bill, maybe you even want to just give us a little bit of background on what the heck you were doing out there.
Well, it's been exciting lately, because last week I was in Louisiana teal hunting with the Bayou Wild Television folks, and I was excited to get to do that, look at a bunch of coastal restoration. And then this week I was with Johnny Marquez from Mississippi Wildlife Federation. He handles sportsman outreach and coastal issues for them. And we went out and caught triple tail, which I'd never fished for before. I caught a bunch of triple tail, and I have them in the cooler now, and caught a few Jack Crevalle, and then we talked about coastal issues in Mississippi.
Awesome. I've been on Johnny's boat last December when we were coming and seeing you. We caught some sheep's head and some speckled trout, and he's a good one. He's one of the best guys I've ever been around, that just wants to get you on some fish and wants to send you home with some and all that good stuff. So that's great.
And he hates the day to come to an end. I mean, he will fish from daylight to dark every day, I believe. And man, that boat will beat you to death when the wind's blowing out in the Gulf. But what about you? What have you been doing, Aaron?
Oh, I'm in the midst of my kids' mountain biking season and archery season. So we're every weekend we're either on a mountain bike race or we're in the archery Elkwood. So we've had some real good times doing both. And I don't know, for some reason where we're hunting, we have a over-the-counter archery type tag. The elk are not making any noise yet. So it's been a little interesting. Usually we'd get some buglers by now, and today it's raining. There's some snow on the peaks. We're hoping maybe this fires them up, because we got one more try out, but hitting it hard, a lot of miles in so far. We've had some big days, but never a bad day in the woods. So we're pretty happy. We call it the most wonderful time of the year here in our house. So Chad, what about you? Tell us what you've been doing.
Man, I've been out filming a lot. I'm trying to get some of these videos out before the anglers, are in the situation. We traditionally, as content creators, we're going out there when something's on fire and doing it, and then by the time we get the videos out, it's kind of over, right? It's like living off of fishing reports. You're living vicariously through people, because if you try to go out there and do something, by the time a guide sits down and takes the time to write the report, you should have been here yesterday. So what I've been doing is, right now it's hotter than donut grease in Alabama, but I'm going out there trying to shoot fall fishing videos. And, I'm not a skinny dude, and I don't know if y'all know this or not, but fat people and heat equals sweat, right? And so I'm out there trying to film these I'm out there trying to fish these fall fishing videos, and I hope that the members of we call ourselves knuckleheads, not like us and them, but we I hope the knuckleheads appreciate the time I'm putting into, like, almost catching on fire to create fall fishing content, because it's tough to go out and force feed a bass something that they're not quite ready to eat yet. But I want to go out and demonstrate where you should be fishing, the technique, how to use it for more success. And I think as we film that way, this year when I'm in the fall, I can bank a lot of the actual catch footage. And next year when I'm shooting these videos early, I can, harken back to those segments and use them. And we just we're just revamping everything in the way that we create content to be more real time, to be more relevant, and make it to where it's not just entertaining, but it's also educational. And so, yeah, so my son and I have been getting up at like 4:45 to get out there and start filming because, here in Alabama, it's 95 degrees by 9 o'clock. And it's already kind of morning hoodie weather, which is good. That means the fall transition's starting to happen. The days are getting shorter. So the fish are starting to do what they should do for fall transition. The deer are starting to do what they're supposed to do. We got deer showing up on cameras where they're supposed to be. I'm down here in Alabama, kind of relearning the area, learning a new area. I just relocated to Huntsville in May, and trying to learn some public land. Don't really have access to any private property here yet. If there's anybody in North Alabama that needs any deer kilt, y'all feel free to reach out to me through my social media, and I would love to come. Thin your doe herd, shoot some cull bucks for you. Or if you just got a big, gnarly buck that is irritating you that you just need to stop filling up your trail camera, then we can take care of that too. So, yeah, man, just getting ready. I missed dove season this year, which kind of sucked, but I was in the middle of moving, getting a lot of this video content pre-shot. And again, I've been really blessed with this new opportunity in North Alabama to move our KBF headquarters, or kayak bass fishing. For those that don't know what KBF is, kayak bass fishing down here. We're in the midst of overhauling a building that they gave us as our headquarters into a podcast studio, a media rigging room where we can go in and do rigging videos on how to set up your electronics, how to set up your rods and reels, how to set up your kayaks and that kind of stuff. So that's pretty exciting. And then we're also going to build a kitchen in the media place that is designed as a studio kitchen, because not a lot of folks know this, but I'm actually going through a divorce now. So I have to cook more than I used to. But my wife was big on cooking. And so I didn't want to steal her thunder that, like, hey, I'm a pretty dang good cook too. And it was kind of it was what brought her joy to cook for the family. And so I just didn't get into that. But man, I'm getting back into cooking. And I'm really enjoying, that field to table stuff, that, catching fish and, taking dead stuff that I killed and turning it into sustenance. You know what I'm saying? And I think for a lot of sportsmen, to a certain extent, we've almost lost contact with that. You know what I'm saying? We go out and we kill it, we wrap it up in plastic, we throw it in the back of the truck, we take it to a processor, never touch it, and it shows back up in plastic wrap. Or you go to the grocery store and you buy it, or go to a restaurant and they bring it to you. And so we're launching a separate channel. My current YouTube channel is Chad Hoover Fishing. And so instead of just jumping it all onto one channel, I'm launching Chad Hoover Outdoors. And the C is going to be camping and cooking. The H is going to be hunting and hiking. Because I consider hiking how you explore new hunting and fishing areas, not just mindlessly walking for no reason. Like, I don't get that part of hiking, but I get it that if I'm out there walking and I don't have a gun, rod, or bow in my hand, I'm technically hiking. So I'm doing the hiking thing. And then I love the off-road and overland thing. I didn't realize this growing up, but that song, I Was Country When Country wasn't cool. Like, there's this new craze called overlanding. And I didn't know I was an overlander. I just thought we put all of our stuff in the truck and went camping. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And a buddy of mine said, overlanders or off-roaders spend a whole bunch of money to live like they're homeless. So I always thought that was pretty funny. So the O in the outdoor part is going to stand for overland and off-road. We're going to do a lot of those videos. And, and over the years, I've come up with some pretty clever rigs and setups and tips and things that I think will be good to share with that community. And it's how I get to the adventures, and it's how I stay on site at the adventures. I've got this rooftop tent on my truck. I referred to it affectionately as the doghouse for a long time because, when you get in trouble at home, you end up in the doghouse. Well, my doghouse was more like Briar Rabbit. No, don't make me go to the doghouse. You know what I'm saying? Because I'd go park it in front of a lake, rig my kayak up, and wouldn't have to leave for 3 days. You know what I'm saying? So
there you go.
I ran into a guy at the gas station the other day, and I call it the whistle dam. Y'all know what the whistle dam is? It's It's when a redneck asks you how much something costs. You're like, man, I got 10 on top of your truck. How much that thing cost? And he's like, $4,000. And they go, damn, so I call I call that
Makes
the
sense.
whistle down. And so he said, well, man, that's expensive. I said, well, when you travel like I do, and you would have to spend as many nights in hotels as I do, it's actually less expensive. But I will tell you this, it's the cheapest waterfront property, and it's the cheapest cabin that you can buy on public land anywhere in the world. And he was like, I never thought about that. That's a good idea, man. So anyway, I do a lot of that. I love waking up where I'm at. Several times I've woke up and had a deer or a turkey. I'll tell this story real fast and then I'll shut up. But I went turkey hunting and I went and parked in the spot where the landowner told me I could go. And I'm sitting in the tent. I got the light on. I don't have any of the windows open because I didn't want to send out any light or sound because I was parked really close to the field where we were supposed to hunt. So he texted me that morning, hey, man, I'm not going to make it out. Got an upset stomach. You get out there and get after him. He said, I promise you, you purr and cut just a little bit and they're going to come out in that field and you're going to get a shot. He said, in fact, I know this is going to sound stupid, but if you'll just hit your car alarm, all the gobblers will answer it and then they'll come to you. And I was like, what the heck? So I'm sitting up in this rooftop tent. And if you're a turkey hunter, you know the sound of turkeys pitching in off the roost. Well, they pitched in right over my rooftop tent. And I started unzipping the little windows and I had probably 30 turkeys around me. Now, even if I had my gun up in my rooftop tent, I wasn't going to shoot one from the tent, but I could have. You know what I'm saying? But it just goes to show that, like, if you can get out there and get in it and get immersed in it, you become part of it. And I love that aspect of kind of how I do what I do. That's why I love kayak fishing. It's a more intimate connection. I say this all the time. Every other type of fishing I do is like fishing in black and white. Kayak fishing is like fishing in IMAX 3D, but it's really more like 4D because you also get the water splashed in your face. You get to feel the fish pull you with it. So you're out there like actually connected to this wild thing, which is, it's my addiction. It's what gets me going. It's who I am. It's why I am. And yeah, so yeah, man, that's
I
kind
love
of
getting you on camera. I love getting you on camera now that you're going to be doing some of the cooking yourself. I mean, were you born in Louisiana or?
Well, I was technically born in Mississippi because I lived on the border right across from Natchez, and we didn't have a hospital. So the closest hospital was in Natchez, Mississippi. This hospital got canceled a few years ago because of the name. It was Jefferson Davis Memorial Hospital, and Jefferson Davis was the president of the Confederacy. So, of course, that became a major sticking point for a lot of people. So they changed the name to Regions or something like that. And now there's a Riverside Medical in Faraday, Louisiana, where I'm originally from. I spent more time in Jonesville, Louisiana than anywhere else. Faraday is known for Mickey Gilley, Jerry Lee Lewis, and Jimmy Swaggart, who are not all just from my hometown, but they're all first cousins, and most people don't know that. Mickey Gilley, Jimmy Swaggart, and Jerry Lee Lewis didn't know. Most people don't know that those guys are first cousins, and so that's where I'm originally from. And then we moved over to Jonesville, where my mama's family's from, more of my life than Faraday, and Jonesville is where, like, world famous, if you're in the arena, world famous bull rider Chris Shivers is from, and of course me. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm from both towns, I guess, technically, but they don't have me on the sign when you're coming into town, like home of. But they do have those guys on there. So
maybe one day they'll get you up there.
Born in Mississippi.
I was just going to say Louisiana is like the one place in the country where no one thinks twice. I mean, men, especially when it comes to fish and game, you're a lot more likely to see the man take charge in the kitchen cooking that stuff than the wife. Yeah.
At least 50-50. Yeah, at least 50-50. But I will correct you, Bill. I am not from Louisiana, okay? I'm from Louisiana, all right? And for the folks that are listening that don't know the difference, if you pull up a map and you look at I-10 goes through kind of the lower third of the state of Louisiana. But Louisiana is two distinct states, right? It's 5 regions, but 2 states. Everything south of I-10 is either Louisiana or Louisiana, right? Everything north of I-10 is almost like a blend of West Mississippi and East Texas. And that's Louisiana. We just drop a whole syllable, right? And you just take out the Louisiana, and you got Louisiana. And so that's where I'm from. I'm from central Louisiana. So yeah.
Now, I'm hit. So you're a Yankee when you're in South Louisiana.
Oh yeah. If you're from above I-10, if you're from above I-10, you're a Yankee. Or they say, "Oh, you're from up north." You know what I'm saying? Like,
right.
Yeah.
Chad, we're going to hit real quick on a different part of your background, and we just went through the anniversary of 9/11, and you were in the Navy at the time, evidently. So, when I looked at your dates and all, and I just real quick wanted to ask you if you maybe what that was like, especially that being in the military at the time. Thank you for your service, and if you have any general thoughts on that you want to share, that's up to you.
Yeah, man. There's a song by Alan Jackson, "Where Were You When the World Stopped Turning?" And I don't think very many people who are our age don't know 100% where you were when that happened. I think in our generation, it's probably that defining moment where you can not only tell where you were, but what you were doing, how you felt, and it's kind of burned in our psyche. I think probably even more so if you were in any type of public service or, law enforcement or military like I was, because when it happened, we didn't know what was happening, right? We know now. Everybody's seen the videos, and it's very well documented what it was. But when it was happening, you didn't know what it was. And so I was in search and rescue in my Navy career the first half, and I had actually just gotten commissioned from being enlisted to becoming an officer, and I was sent back to my last enlisted assignment waiting to start flight training, which ironically enough for me was the same place. I was in Corpus Christi, my last enlisted tour, went to Norfolk for about 4 months, got picked up for OCS. When I graduated, when I went back to Corpus Christi, and I was actually working in the same unit that I was working in when I was enlisted. Kind of a happy coincidence, a rare thing. But the job that I had then was I was a liaison to the air ops officer. My part-time job my job until I got back into flight training I was the air ops liaison officer. Like I was basically his assistant. And I remember I went to the gym. It was went to the gym I went in the morning, got everything going. Told my boss, I was like, "Hey, I'm going to go hit the gym for an hour and a half. I'll be back." I was pulling back into the parking lot. He was coming out of the parking lot, jumped out of his car, left his car running because everybody was frantic. Jumped back in his car, stopped the car. Wasn't one of those TikTok challenges. He just didn't put the car in park. And jumped back in his car, stopped the car. And I remember that so distinctly because, again, this day will be burned in your memory. But he was also such an all-together guy. I had worked with him when I was enlisted and always looked up to him. He was one of my mentors, one of the reasons that I worked as hard as I did to get a commission. And so to see him frazzled was rare. So gets his car stopped, walks over, says, "Grab your backpack, head over to the admin building. We have an all officers meeting. An airplane just hit the World Trade Center." I was like, "What?" So again, we're thinking anything from bad air traffic control to, who knows. By the time we get over there, they bring up all these screens. If you guys have ever seen the military movies where they're in a war room with a bunch of TV screens and whatever, it's like that. Okay. So we go in this room, all these TV screens up. We got every major news network on. And one of the reporters is talking about, the airplane hitting the World Trade Center, and they're showing the footage of the first one from the building that they got the footage from, which is now an iconic, world famous shot that most people have seen. And we're in this room, probably 30 to 50 officers and chiefs and senior enlisted, and the second airplane,
Yeah.
like, came into the frame, hit the building, and I just remember, the holy crap mindset. My boss picks up the phone. It's the Secretary of the Navy's office that basically said every naval installation is on 100% lockdown until further notice. So we're in this room, locking the base down. You go do this, you go do this, you go do this. And I'll tell people all the time, the Navy, actually, the word Navy stands for never again volunteer yourself, is what, if you're in the Navy, that's what people say it means. So I'm a brand new officer, and they knew me on the base because I had been the sailor of the year the last year I was there enlisted. And I'm just kind of one of those people that like gets into everything, and people know who I am, kind of a deal. So I said to the skipper is going, hey, you guys take this part of the base. You guys, you go take that part of the base. You guys take this part of the base. And back then, the Navy didn't have Naval Security Forces, NSF, like we do now. We had Naval Auxiliary Security Force, where people just went there, temporary assigned duty, and it wasn't their real profession. And we didn't have anywhere near the level of security, believe it or not, even on military bases that we do now. There was none of those petitions you had to weave through, no big gates. I mean, really, back in the day, if you wanted to get on a base, you and a couple of buddies could have got a pickup truck, put a bumper, on the front of it, and got a couple shotguns, and you probably could have made it onto most military bases, except for the really secure ones. So my young, brand new, dumb officer butt says, sir, I got a question. Why don't you just put one person in charge of security and let them coordinate all this instead of having 50 different people? I'll never forget it. He stopped, he turned and looked at me, pointed his finger dead at me, and said, congratulations, Ensign Hoover. You're now the Naval Air Station Corpus Christi security officer. Make it happen. Now, for those of you that are listening that don't know what that means, I was about as wet behind the ears as an officer as you could be. In the world of your career, if you go from newborn to infant to adult, I was somewhere between newborn and crapping my diaper for the first time. That's how young in my Navy career as an officer I was. And now I'm the security officer for Naval Air Station Corpus Christi, one of the biggest training commands in the Navy. Airplanes taking off and landing every 3 to 5 minutes, open base, and on 3 sides, we were water. So imagine trying to secure a base that 3 sides of it's water. Anybody could get in a John boat, drive around to the bay side, drive up on the beach, and just walk onto the base. So it was challenging, to say the least. And, like I talked about before, things become more and more apparent. We probably sit in on more briefings and meetings than I ever had. But I think that we assessed threats that we probably should have assessed before. We implemented policies and procedures that we should have done before. We did a lot of things that we probably should have done before. Every 9/11, when it rolls around, it's just like that song. You 100% know where you are, where you were. You get that feeling again. It's kind of like if you smell something or you taste something that reminds you of something, and you're transcendentally taken to that spot. That's how every 9/11 is for me. Every 8/14. Yeah. Didn't realize this was going to do this, but after 9/11, I lost a buttload of friends going out there to reestablish a secure homeland. Since then, I've lost a buttload of friends who've come home from those inexplicable things we did and had to do and got involved in, that are now like taking their own lives at an unbelievable rate. And so, yeah, man, 9/11, not just for the day and not just for the events that unfolded after that, is the defining moment in my adult life. It's where my career um, transitioned. Yeah, man, it changed my life forever. It also changed my outlook on training and preparation and really being ready for something instead of sort of being ready for it. And then in case it happens, because, you know, post 9/11, if you served in the military, every day was little chick in the sky is falling, doomsday scenario preparation. And that's translated over into my Navy career or into my civilian career. It's translated into what we talked about before: preparation for fishing, preparation for camping, preparation for, um, I'd be lying if I didn't say I routinely have 3 to 5 weeks worth of rations. I'm not like a crazy doomsday prepper, and I'm not saying all doomsday preppers are crazy. What I'm saying is I'm not one of those guys that's got 18 million rounds of ammo. Got a pretty good chunk. I'm not one of those people that has, 7 years. I don't have a hole dug in the ground anywhere I can go to, but I do have 3 to 5 weeks worth of cash, 3 to 5 weeks worth of food, water, fuel, things like that I have stockpiled, for lack of a better way of putting it, because that's how I was trained to think after 9/11. And I encourage everybody to think that way to a certain extent. We've seen it with government shutdowns. We've seen it with, inflation. We've seen it with all these other things. You never know when your life could be interrupted. And that's why I think folks like us and the ones that are probably listening who can be self-sufficient to provide sustenance for ourselves should get back to doing it more. I'm going to go to the processor some, but I'm going to go to the processor way less than I used to. I'm going to focus on that field to table kind of a thing. You know what I mean? Because one, I've lost 140 pounds doing the carnivore thing, and I truly enjoy eating that way. I really do. I feel better, happier, better mental clarity. I don't get triggered the way that I used to. It's just helped me all around. It's helped me with my mood, which obviously because of its effect on hormones, I think it's helped me with my brain function. I mean, we don't have these little pointy teeth over here to the side to crack open a quinoa. I don't even know what a quinoa plant looks like, and most people don't, or where the heck it even comes from. We don't have these pointy teeth for tearing kale apart. We just don't. We're carnivores. We're technically omnivores because we can eat it all, but yeah, man, I'm just trying to get back to a lot of that. I've always had a really good connection, but I'm not going to lie. There's been years from the standpoint of convenience that I've gotten a little more bougie than most people, gotten a little more, I live in a neighborhood with a POA. I don't really need the dead deer hanging up next to my house. My neighbors, offended by it or whatever. And now here's what I figured out. If I've got neighbors that are offended by a dead deer hanging up in my yard, I need new neighbors. And I can't ask them to move, so I did.
Howdy, listeners. For more great content, check out NWF Outdoors social media on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter.
Connect with us. We want to hear from you. Send us your ideas for podcast guests and questions in the comments.
And for even more excellent content, here's a message from our partner podcast.
Hey everyone, this is Marsha Brownlee from Artemis Sportswomen. We know you love awesome stories about hunting, fishing, and conservation, so head on over to the Artemis podcast. You'll meet adventurous, accomplished women who are redefining conservation through their lives in the field and on the water. Filled with humor, audacity, empathy, and intelligence, Artemis brings you new voices and introduces you to women from all walks of the sporting community. Find Artemis wherever you get your podcasts.
Man, we could have like 10 podcasts off of just what you told us. And we went from, we started with some of your 9/11 experience, which thank you for sharing. I know that's that's tough and always drags up a lot of different memories. It was a good reminder that sacrifice a lot of folks made. So thank you for doing that. But and then you got into a bunch of other really cool stuff that we could drift into. But I did want to ask you, let's get over to your kayak fishing career and kind of how all of that you just talked about set you up to now you're here, you're doing this thing. Tell us a little bit more about how you got started and kind of what it is and what folks ought to know.
Well, ironically enough, Corpus Christi is also a big part of that. I went there for search and rescue. I was flying around in a helicopter. I was really a big-time freshwater fisherman growing up, but I had hit the coast a couple times going down to Louisiana, and always loved it, just didn't get to do it as much. And so when I'm flying around in a helicopter at, between 25 and 100 feet, I'm getting to see these redfish schooling. I can see the flats. There's times that we could fly and I could see flounder laying in sand in these shallow flats in Corpus Christi. And so I started having really good success really quickly because I had that unfair advantage of having that third eye view of going out there. And like, I had Google Earth before Google Earth was a thing. It was called going to work every day, flying around in a helicopter and seeing it from the air. And so when I started saying, man, that's a big muddy patch in that flat, I wonder what that is. And we fly by real low and I see redfish tail sticking up and go, oh, that's redfish. So I get off work, I go out there and that school's still there and I start casting into it and I'm hooking up every 3 minutes. I just got the bug. So I got hooked on fishing. Early on, I was wade fishing. Then I bought a boat and started getting out onto those flats and started getting a lot more success. Well, I was going to college and I didn't want any student loan debt. I just didn't. I'd seen people would struggle with it. So I had the GI Bill, but I didn't want to use it because I wanted to save that for after my career in case I needed it. And the Navy had this program called tuition assistance, but I was going to school so aggressively, I was maxing out my tuition assistance and I was paying for about a third of my school out of my pocket. So I started guiding fishing trips on the side. One day I was guiding a fishing trip with some tourists that were in Corpus Christi from China, and they wanted to go out and catch anything. And so the easiest thing to catch was to catch jack crevalle and ladyfish from the surf. So I went to Padre Island National Seashore, and I would drive down looking for these fish in the face of the waves. As soon as I saw them, we'd jump out and start casting these half and halves and clousers and deceivers. Everybody would hook up. The ladyfish jump. We call them poor man's tarpon. And the jack crevalle just pull drag like nothing else. So if you can get your clients on a few ladyfish and a couple jack crevalle, it's always a good day. Well, I knew that there was all these surf fishermen that were fishing for sharks on the beach. So I'd always carry a bucket in the back of my truck that I had for guiding. And if we caught a small enough jack that it would go in the bucket, I'd throw a couple of them in the bucket because it is by far, ladyfish and jack crevalle are the best shark bait in the world. And because these guys wanted to see a shark, I figured if I've got some shark bait, what better way to walk up to a shark fisherman and go, hey, man, I got you some ladyfish and some jack crevalle. My guys want to hang out for a minute and see a shark, take a picture with it, all that good stuff. Yeah, no problem. So we roll up on this guy who has got a captain's chair welded to a hitch receiver in the back of a Jeep. And I see the rod in the rod holder and the tip is just bobbing. And I look up and go, what the heck? And I look out and he's out in his kayak paddling a bait out. And he's 300 yards out there, still pulling line, the tip of that rod shaking. So I told my clients, I was like, hey, if you guys want to hang out, this guy's like by far one of the best shark fishermen on the beach. I didn't know he paddled his baits out with kayaks, but I've seen him in some of the articles and stuff. And let's just hang out. The guy's a character. So they're, yeah, no problem. So we caught a couple more ladyfish and threw them in the bucket. So by the time he gets back, we got him like the best bucket O sharkfish bait ever. So when he paddles back in, I asked him, I said, man, do you always use that kayak to paddle, your baits out there? And he's like, oh yeah, man, that's like the only way to do it. You got to get it out past the first set of guts and all this. All you're going to catch is little black tips and stuff if you fish right there in casting distance. But if you get a little further out, you can get into your sandbars, your tigers, some of those bigger fish. I was like, dang, that's cool, man. So no sooner than we're talking about it and I give him the bucket of fish, he hooks up. Rod bends over, drag starts screaming. He's got a rope tied to his kayak, hooked to the back of the truck, He's like, all right, y'all follow me. And we're like, what the heck? He jumps out of the captain's seat, cranks the lever drag about halfway, jumps in the Jeep and starts following the shark down the beach. So then I figured out why he had the fighting chair welded to the back of his Jeep, follows the shark down the beach, turns uphill, backs down, jumps, gets back out in that fighting chair and is just fighting it up.
That's amazing.
My clients are blown away. I'm a big fan of this guy's system and how dialed in he was to what he did. Lands about a 12-foot tiger shark. The clients that I had that day are over the moon. They all kneel down behind it, take a bunch of pictures. Then we were able to help him, surf launch this tiger shark, get it back out in the water. You never bring it completely up on the beach if you really know what you're doing. And this guy was really good. He got the nose up on the beach, got a tail wrap around it, and then that way you would go next to it and kneel down and take your photo. And then he kept water going over the gills and that whole thing, and then released it after that. So back then, we didn't have.
Can I ask if that was a whistle dam moment too? Because I probably would have whistle damned.
Yeah. Well, I can tell you the clients. I had 4 clients that day, which is crazy. But when you're fly fishing, you can spread out on the beach. It's not that big a deal. I would never do that in a boat or, in a kayak. But they were like over the moon. And so one guy spoke English, and the other 3 were Chinese, but they didn't speak English. So he was like the translator, and he spoke really good English, not just like broken English, and was doing his best to be a liaison. Like he spoke really good. He spoke English really well. Listen to me. He spoke good English. He speaks better English than me. So he had gone to like some major universities, very intelligent, articulate guy. They were there at some business meeting for a big banking system, and his company was spearheading the technological overhaul of the bank. But those guys were beyond over the moon. Excited. They loved it. They eat it up. That's all they talked about. They didn't talk about the 100 fish day trip that they had with me. They talked about, seeing and experiencing that shark. But we didn't have cell phone. I didn't have cell phone back then. So back in the old day, you actually wrote your number on a piece of paper and gave it to somebody. They would call you when you were at work, but it would go to your answering machine. And then when you came home, you had a little red light blinking on this tape recorder looking apparatus. You listened to all your messages and you called people back. So I go home like 3 days later, and straight up, this guy's left a voicemail that says, "Hey man, I know you like that kayak that I got. Well, guess what? It's for sale. Call me." I called him up. I was like, "Look, man, I'd love to buy the kayak. I really would. I think ever since I've seen it, I haven't been able to get it out of my head, but I've only got like $100. And he goes, "That's good. I'll take it." I'm like, no. Like, I've only got $100 to my name, bro. Like, I don't got $100 to spend on something. It's 15 days till payday, 16 days till payday, and I've only got $100. I was broke, young, in the military kind of, thing. He goes, dude, go pull out what you can, and we'll work it out. Just come on over. I'm gonna give you my address. So he gives me his address, and back then you actually had to know how to get somewhere or get directions. You couldn't just put the nav thing in your phone. So I drive over to his place. Well, on the way, I stopped at the ATM to get the money out, and I actually had $100. Well, you can't get $100 out if you have $100 because they take the processing fee out. So if it breaks into a 20, now you've got $80 you can get out, right? So I'm like, oh man. So I get the $80 out. I go meet the guy. Look, man, I told you I've only got $100 to my name, but I can only get 80 out of the bank unless I go into the bank. I can't go to the bank today. He's like, I'll take it. Tell you what I'll do. I'm going to give you this rod and reel to sweeten the deal, the paddle and the PFD. Bring me 40 back for 120 when you can, and we'll call it good. I was like, all right, dude, but look, it's going to be payday. Yeah, man, no problem. So I got that little kayak from that guy, stopped at a pawn shop on the way home and sold the rod and reel that he gave me for $75. I was literally into my first kayak for like $5. And I had a ball in that little thing. It was the Ocean Kayak Frenzy, I think was the first model name. I think it became the Frenzy. It might not have been named that then. It was a little 9.5 foot, 8.5 foot. I think I flipped in it more than I fished in it the first 6 trips I was on. But back then, man, I was wade fishing, and I was really using the kayak as a floating tackle box to get across channels more than actually fishing out of it, because wade fishing is a big thing on the Texas coast. Then when I wanted to start covering more water, I upgraded to a little bit bigger kayak, and then maybe 3 months after that, a little bit bigger one. And I bought all of them used, and I learned how to paddle. I learned how to become an actual kayaker, because if I'm kayak fishing, then I'm also a kayaker. That took a while before that light bulb to come on. I'd say the first 5 or 7, maybe even 10 years that I kayak fished, I really beat the water into submission instead of actually paddling. And, but I loved it. And I was doing things and getting to fish and seeing fish that nobody else could get to. So that's how my kayak fishing career started. And it was really normal to me because I had grown up in Louisiana, fishing out of pirogues, fishing out of small John boats, fishing out of dugout canoes, fishing out of actual canoes. And so really small kind of one-man watercraft was more my jam anyway. And most of the places that we went, you couldn't get a bass boat into anyway. As a kid and teenager and even a young adult, I was dragging John boats over beaver dams and up banks and, throwing it in the back of the truck and taking it to places you couldn't get to anyway. So it was kind of a natural connection to the way that I already fished. It's just now there was a plastic version of it that was durable, that was a little bit more stable. For those of y'all that don't know what a pirogue is, you can look it up. It's Pirogue. It's a French word. That's actually from Louisiana, but we have a lot of that culture in Louisiana. So, but it's like sitting on a greased log. Straight up, a pirogue is so unstable. It's not even funny for, the small, pond hopper. Most people in Louisiana use them for putting their duck decoys out, and that's about it. You know what I mean? They're just not an all day fish out of it type craft until you get into the bigger ones. So I had grown up very familiar with small watercraft and canoes and things like that. And we have this thing where I'm from in Louisiana called backwater. Every time it rains and the Mississippi River floods, it floods every field around us. So it was not uncommon to need a John boat to get to your house or to get from your house to the bus stop or, across the field to the main road. They say the earth is 72 to 75% water. I think Louisiana is about 16% of that 75% because, I think we got more water than land. And even the land ain't guaranteed to be there. It could just be a big floating bog if you really get into it. So the kayak fishing thing for me, I just took to it like a fish in water because I was already used to it. And we moved to my dad was into some we'll call it agriculture, right? That wasn't exactly as legal as it is now. And so we had to relocate involuntarily when I was around 10 or 11 years old to Georgia. And so we moved to Georgia, and he kind of flew below the radar for a long time, working on Tybee Island and then up in Savannah proper. And what was crazy is that part of Savannah was also very conducive to the same marshy backwaters, backwoods type fishing. And that's where I got really exposed to saltwater fishing. Kind of knew that when I joined the Navy. And so it was already second nature. And as they say, the rest is history. It's funny that you mentioned 9/11. I went to Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University and was going to Embry-Riddle when 9/11 happened. And the tie to 9/11 is that the actual pilots that flew the planes through the World Trade Center to the Pentagon and into the field in Pennsylvania all actually went to Embry-Riddle to learn how to fly. And the running joke is they went there to learn how to fly but not land, which is garbage, crap joke. But I also went to that school, so I had that connection, with 9/11. But the reason I mentioned that in my kayak fishing career is by going to Embry-Riddle and by studying aviation and by being in aviation, I was already very familiar with cockpits and cockpit ergonomics and how to lay out cockpits and how to make them more functional for different size people and bodies and things like that, because you can't buy a $30 million airplane and only have people from 5'5" to 5'8" fly it. You've got to have that airplane be able to accommodate more anthropic or body types. And so when I started helping design fishing kayaks, I'm like, we got to make the seat slide. To me, that was common sense. And if you fish in a kayak today, it's that way. It wasn't that way when I started designing fishing kayaks. And there's been quite a few things that I brought to the kayak fishing industry, and people give me credit for it, but really it was just aviation stuff that I brought to cockpits. I didn't come up with it myself. Tracks where things can slide. Yes, I'm the guy that brought that to kayak fishing, but I just brought it from aviation. Whoever thought of it for aviation is the person that really gets the credit, because I'm just kind of like a, you know what I mean? I'm like a regurgitator for that, from that industry to this industry. But I was very blessed with having that cockpit design and ergonomics part of my career in the Navy, having all that aviation experience, and then saying, man, let's make these kayaks better. And so that was the biggest blessing in disguise, is that I had all that aviation experience, decided to make kayak fishing my career, and it worked. It translated. A lot of the pods and removable parts and things that we've come up with are all from technologies that existed for years in aviation.
We could go, I think, about 3 hours just on this, but I want to get to your career real quick. And I mean, you started I don't know if you started it, but the first catch photo release type tournaments I ever saw were the kayak bass tournaments. And now that's been adapted even into some of the bass boat tournaments. The big league stuff on that end of the spectrum. So kind of let's talk a little bit about that, and also about your shows. I mean, that's where I know you from, is television. I mean, when I saw you last month, I said, okay, I know this guy.
So I didn't start Catch Photo Release. I can say that I was in the room when it started getting talked about, but I wasn't the guy. In earnest, there's 3 or 4 people. I was a guide in Texas at the time, and there was a guy named Chris Martin that ran a thing called Guidelines, and he actually wanted to promote Catch Photo Release for catching fish, photographing them, and releasing them, but not for tournaments. So the first time I ever heard the phrase Catch Photo Release was from him. He did a little get-together at his lodge in, I think it's Bay City, Texas, and wrote an article about it called CPR, Breathe Life Back into the Fishery, or something along those lines. And that's the first time I ever heard it articulated that way, and I thought it was clever. A guy named Rick Roberts, who for years ran the Snook Foundation down in Florida, started a series called the Extreme Edge Kayak Fishing Tournament Series. There had been some localized kind of almost tribal type tournaments up to that point with just little small cliques and clubs. So Rick also didn't come up with it, but he was the first person to truly do it and try to make a series out of it and take it nationwide. Back then we were using disposable cameras. We'd issue them to the angler. They would take the photo, with the little windy thing. At the end of the tournament, they would submit it to the tournament director, get a claim check, kind of like if you check your code at a restaurant. We would run them all to a 1 hour photo, which, by the way, 1 hour photo is 1 hour-ish photo. And it's not designed to bring 75 to 100 cameras in at one time and say, all right, I need all of these back in an hour. So you can only imagine what would happen if you put 100 rednecks and outdoorsmen and anglers from all different walks of life together and gave them 3 hours to wait on the results. There was a lot of inebriation that took place, a lot of sharing of spirits. We had some fights. We had some spirited debates, And so the Extreme Edge Kayak Fishing Series with Rick Roberts was really the formula that I used when I decided to do what I did with kayak bass fishing. Another gentleman started a thing called 321 Fish out of Jacksonville. I think that was probably either the first or right there with the first, like, organized catch photo release online. I actually reached out to him to ask him if he wanted to partner because I was going to grow kayak bass fishing. He actually told me he already owned the URL. What do I need you for? Was kind of rude about it. And I was like, well, actually, you don't own the URL. I do it. Well, later that week, he actually sent me an email. Oh, I was wrong. I have Bass Kayak Fish. That's such a better name anyway. And I just remember thinking, like, how do you think Bass Kayak Fish sounds better than kayak bass fishing? but whatever. And so his loss, no big deal, whatever. It's part of it. When you're trying to be a pioneer, you're going to get resistance. You're going to get people that hate you. You're going to get people that love you. The one thing that I tell people out there, if you're trying to be an influencer, you're trying to be a personality, don't listen to everything that the people that love you say, and don't listen to everything that the people that hate you say, because the truth is probably somewhere in the middle. You're probably a butthead, partially of what the people that are calling you the Antichrist are calling you, and you're probably not as good as the people who are, making you out to be, the be all end all be all. And so it's hard, though. It's hard not to take all the critics to heart, and it's hard not to take all the praise to heart. I had to learn that lesson the hard way, So, but we started it, and I think we were the first to truly get really good sponsorship support and go out nationwide and start the online challenge series first and do all that kind of stuff. And so, I mean, I get the credit for it a lot of times, and I feel uncomfortable with, because truly there was a lot of people behind the scenes that did it in the beginning. I was in the right place at the right time with the right opportunities, the right connections, and the right skill sets to get it off the ground and to get it the traction that it needed to get to where it is now. But I definitely didn't start it. I saw the opportunity. I first tried to respect the person that did it and said, hey, let's work together. There was no interest in that. And then just decided to do my own thing, and, there's been some bumps in that road, just like anything else. If you're heading out across the field and you're not following a road, you're going to run into some rocks, some roots, some irrigation ditches, it's just part of it. And that's why pioneers get arrows in the back, and that's why you're the first one to hit the bumps, and it's just part of it. But yeah, it's been a blessing. I actually made a Facebook post about this last night. I don't really Facebook that much more anymore because, for some of the PTSD stuff that I realized that I had to deal with, I realized that I was very easily triggered. And the best way to not get easily triggered is to focus on yourself, for one, but you can also just remove the trigger. You know what I mean? Like, it's like when you're doing an intersecting field of fire in like a breaching scenario or in some type of, combat maneuvers, the number one way to keep from shooting your buddy in the back is don't have your finger on the trigger until you're ready to pull it, and don't point the barrel at something unless you want to kill it, kind of a thing. So just like I said with the neighbor and the whole deer thing, I can't ask him to move, so I did. And in that same scenario, I've just removed a lot of the social triggers and stimulation from my life. I've balanced out how much time I spend on it. But yeah, man, it's been a road. You know what I'm saying? It's been a smooth road at times. It's been an uphill road at times. It's been a downhill road where we got a lot of speed at other times. And just like anything else, when you take a bunch of passionate practitioners, everybody's going to have their idea for the way that it should be done, and we've got that now. We're at that adolescent stage of kayak fishing now. We're not a young toddler. We're not a baby. We're not we're not prepubescent teen. We're kind of like that late teenager into adult where your like legs are too long for your body and your arms are too long for your body and your Adam's apple's just starting to come in and your voice hasn't quite dropped, but it hasn't quite, you're in that cracking phase. We're in that awkward, weird adolescent phase of kayak fishing right now, still establishing our identity, still establishing who we are. There's little factions and sections popping up, just like any other, community. But we're in that maturation process where we're turning that corner, I think, on going mainstream. And my goal all along has been to get more people into fishing and more people back into fishing, because, when we're out there on the water, when we're out there in the woods, when we're out there on the trails, we're the first line of defense for conservation. You know what I'm saying? No hippie at a park feeding the deer has been the one that said, man, there's something wrong with that deer. Let's take a look at this chronic wasting disease and see if that's something we need to address. That's been a hunter. No recreational paddler paddling down the bank or down a river sees that drain that's a runoff from an agricultural scenario that's causing an algae bloom or that's causing a toxic spill, are the ones that are going and putting the time, effort, and energy into getting it to the authorities that need to have it stopped. They might go by and go, that's BS, and go make a Facebook post about it, but they're not the one that actually takes up the action of going all the way to protecting the fish, protecting the fishery, implementing a cleanup plan, talking about prevention to keep it from happening, in the future, things like that. So we are the eyes and ears of the environment. And the more of us that are out there with our finger on the pulse, the better off we are when we start to have a problem with the pulse. And so that's always been my mission, is to get more people into the sport. And probably more than that, get more people back into the sport. The things that I'm the proudest of is when I see a son who got excited about kayak fishing because it's kind of like a new, exciting way to do it. And then 6 months later, I see him and his dad fishing together, and the dad posts or talks about the fact that, man, I hadn't fished in 20 years, but when my son got his fishing kayak and I wanted to spend time with him, I started kayak fishing. This is the best way I've ever fished in my life. That's the stuff right there that makes the long nights worth it, makes the criticism worth it, makes dealing with the haters worth it. Like, that is and I also believe it's the best form of therapy that there is to be out there and be like, we were made wild. That's what we're supposed to do. You know what I mean? We're supposed to be out there doing it. We're not supposed to be sucked into the toxic environment of social media 8, 10, 12 hours a day. We're not supposed to sit on a couch and watch TV 7, 8 hours. We're not supposed to eat everything processed and drink everything processed. We're supposed to take an active role in our sustenance. That's why we got pointy little teeth, because we are predators. And if you don't like that, that's fine. But that's not who I am, and that's not the people that I associate with.
Hey, Chad, I'm gonna steal something from Bill a little bit, because when we were talking about this podcast, he said one of the things that happened when he heard you talk was you talked about getting uncomfortable when you're trying to grow. And I think you've touched on it a few different places right here. You're talking about personal growth and figuring out what your issues are and how to, kind of combat some of the problems that arise. And it really struck with me, because one of the things I tell my kids all the time is get good at the tough stuff. Who cares about all the other stuff? Do hard things and get good at them and enjoy the hard part. That's what makes you a great human. And when Bill told me that, it struck with me, and I was like, man, more people need to hear that, and you're out there kind of leading the charge on this. Talk about that a little, because I think it's a thing we've gotten away from in a lot of ways, right? Everybody wants everything to be easy. How about the hard thing and the good and the hard stuff? Talk about that.
Yeah, I was very fortunate and very blessed to have Gary Mason in my life. And so Gary Mason told me in 2019 or 2018 that I was getting an award and I had to write a speech. I was like, oh, Lord, Gary, I don't deserve that thing, man. Get that to somebody else. No, it's you. So one year I got the Tennessee Sportsman of the Year award. The next year, Gary calls me and goes, hey, this year you're going to get the American Trailblazer Award. And I was like, you mean like the award that Ray Scott just got? He was like, yeah. I said, dude, you're crazy. I said, Gary, if you give me that award within 10 years of Ray Scott, people are going to start questioning your judgment, bro. Like, he's like, nope, I've thought about it. You're getting it. And I was like, oh crap, okay. So the immediate thing that happens to you is when somebody tells you you're getting an award, if you're the kind of person that I am, and like most, people are, is you immediately then go, now I got to live up to this thing. Especially if you feel like you hadn't lived up to it or earned it or whatever, now you have to, right? So I do that spiel, and Gary introduces me and says some really, flattering words, and I was honored, but at the same time, like, not really comfortable. The next year he tells me I'm going into the Hall of Fame. And I was like, bro, that's for old people. He's like, Chad, you're old, man. I'm like, dude, I'm like 46, 45 at the time. Well, COVID happened and we pushed back. We didn't have an actual ceremony in 2020. So Gary moved it to 2021 and said, "You're going." I thought maybe hopefully he'd forget about it and it would just get a better group of people come along. And then so in 2021, I did the Hall of Fame acceptance, and you have to do a speech. And Gary's like, "All right, man, do the speech. You've killed it the last 2 years. I'm going to save you for later in the thing. I'm expecting you to be one of my better speeches." I was like, "Oh, thanks, Gary. I was just going to go up there and say, thank you guys. I appreciate it. I feel undeserving. And then peace and be out." Right. So he impresses upon me that he wants me to write this speech. So I write the speech. It resonated with the audience there and people on Facebook and things like that. And so immediately after the ceremony, I mean, a week later, "All right, man, people loved the speech. It was great. You're good at it. You've got the gift for gab. You do this on TV, blah, blah, blah. So next year, I'd love for you to be the keynote speaker for the whole ceremony." I was like, "Gary, dude, you're killing me, man." So I was flattered, honored, I accepted. And I started trying to figure out what am I gonna say to the largest collection of the most influential outdoors people, conservationists, inventors, company owners, videographers, whatever in the world. What am I gonna say to those people? And I'm going to give you the Cliff Notes version of it because otherwise we would have a whole nother hour podcast. But I wrote the speech like 3 times. And I remember sitting there and I had 3 different angles that I was going to take. And I remember I read all 3 of them. And in each one of them, there was things that was going to make people uncomfortable. I was like, man, that's just going to make people really uncomfortable. Then I read the next one. Golly, that thing that I'm about to say right there, that's going to make people really uncomfortable. Then I got the other one. So the only thing that all 3 of them had in common was that it was going to make people uncomfortable. And I just remember having the word uncomfortable written on a sticky note, stuck on my computer screen. And I left, went out and did some fishing, hunting, shot some stuff, did man stuff, right? Came back, sat down. All right, I got to work on that dang on speech again because Gary's going to kill me if this thing ain't good. And I remember looking at that uncomfortable sticky. It had 3 other words on it. Uncomfortable was the biggest one. And I went, you know what? That's what I'm going to do the speech about. It's the only thing that I wish each of these 3 speeches didn't have in it. But you know what? Screw that. I'm sick of this. Everybody gets a trophy, handheld, just over desensitizing of everything. Crap. We are the leaders. If we participate in this crap, we are complicit. So then I started writing on the topic of getting uncomfortable. And and then I started thinking about analogies and things that were that made sense for people in that audience. And I wrote a really good speech. I'm going to break my arm, pat myself on the back. The problem is that's not the speech I delivered because like a dummy and like an old man, I refuse to wear glasses and I'm too hard-headed to print stuff out in bigger font because I feel like that's like giving up. And I haven't increased the font size on my phone like I've seen some of my older friends do because I'm still just trying to hang on. But I got these little cheap reader glasses from Rite Aid or Walmart or Walgreens or something like that. And I was going to wear those so I could read the speech, which I'd have been better off just printing it in a bigger font, hindsight being 2020. But I forget my glasses in the hotel. I'm getting ready to go on. And I'm going, oh, my God, I thought they were in my jacket. They're not. So I just kind of stand over to the side and read it and get some of the bullet points in my brain. And I went out there and winged it. But I still got the point across, which was we've got to focus on getting uncomfortable. We got to be willing to go through the fire to get out the other side better, both in mental health and being willing to talk about having mental health issues as a man. We were just told, suck it up, buttercup, or man up when I was coming up, and we still do that to other people. But at some point, we've got to address these things or they just become bigger problems. As a conservative, I'm a 2A guy to the core, but I think we also got to have a real solid, strong conversation about mental health, because it's crazy people who are shooting people. Let me say that again. It's crazy people who are shooting people at these mass shootings, right? It's kind of like the whole McDonald's, like the fork didn't make you fat thing, that whole thing. It's not the weapon, it's the use of the weapon by crazy people. So the uncomfortable thing for me was that I feel like we have to get uncomfortable. We have to be willing to have tough conversations, but that's not what I'm really talking about. What I'm talking about is get out there and do hard stuff, walk a long ways, sweat. We've now got more UTVs and ATVs and electric mountain bikes and carts and all that crap to make our lives easier. That's great, but get out there and do hard stuff. You know what I mean? I've never made a glass of sweet tea after a landscaping company come over and cut my grass and walked out there and appreciated how good the grass looked. But I have cut the grass, sweated my butt off, walked out there with that same glass of sweet tea, sweat still running down my face, and man, yeah, yard looks good. You just appreciate things more that you work for, that you put hard work into. And so we just have to get back to being uncomfortable. We do. And that was the genesis of how that speech came into being. And man, I've honestly had more people reach out to me since that ceremony about that than probably anything else I've ever done in my career. And I hope we can create a movement, if you will, of people getting out there and moving again, people getting out there and experiencing again, and people getting out there and here's the other thing. We've almost created this culture where people don't want to try anything unless success is guaranteed. They don't want to even try unless success is guaranteed, right? They only want to do it, and they want all of the odds to be stacked in their favor, and they want government intervention, and they want all of these things to be put into place to ensure success. The only way to ensure success is to ensure that you fail, because a failure is one of the steps on the way to success, one of the many ways on to the, one of the many steps on the way to success. And all success really is a collection of failures that didn't kill you. That's it. You know what I mean? And I just think that we've gotten so desensitized to everything because we don't do hard stuff anymore. Convenience has overtaken our lives. Comfort has overtaken our lives. Living our best life, hashtag on social media, has taken over our lives. I promise you, all those people posting hashtag living their best life, one of two things are happening there. They're full of crap and they're lying to you, or somebody else is taking care of them and somebody else is doing the hard thing so they can live their best life. And that's going to come to an end at some point unless they're just a trust fund kid or, have more money than they could ever spend or something like that. But most of us don't have the luxury of just doing whatever we want, whenever we want, however we want, posting it on Instagram and hashtagging living my best life. Most of us have to go out there and make that best life. And I think that you'll get more out of it and you'll get more satisfaction out of it if you participate in it,
Chad, let me tell you something I found particularly impactful, especially as I sat looking around that room. You also talked about we talk all the time about getting new people involved in hunting and angling, both adults and kids. It can't just be the kids, can't just be adults. We need more people. And that's the future of conservation in this country is more people involved, as we all know. And we're in a room where 40 was a young age in that room. It's a bunch of industry leaders. I mean, people that folks listening would recognize their names, television stars and industry leaders. And you implored everyone to get uncomfortable in meeting new people kind of where they are. We get back here and we're so used to it and we're talking to each other and we live in our own little worlds and echo chambers sometimes. And that's not what gets these new folks who all they see is you catch a fish on television, me shoot a duck on television. It's easy. And that's not necessarily meeting those folks where they are. And all of us need to get out of that habit of just doing it our way. and expecting people to come in. And that was, to me, particularly impactful for me personally, just being within the industry.
Yeah, and like you said, I also encouraged a lot of the older folks who have this legacy and have this following and have this influence to get more aggressive at social media, because it's a foreign thing for them. So a lot of them have hired people and did this, and there's a disingenuine disconnection, and you also don't have your finger on the pulse of what's going on in the community. And so I did implore people to get more active and to get onto those platforms like TikTok, for example, and Instagram and YouTube is a great way to reach, and it's a great way to teach. And that's what I love about it. But the thing that I love about it the most, though, is we can make hunting and fishing and spending time in the outdoors look exciting. We can get kids fired up about doing it. We're not competing with video games. Video games were the big villain when I was a kid, similar to the way when I went to SEER school, it was all the Russian, that's the big enemy. When I was a kid, and probably you guys are in the same arena, every older outdoorsman was like, we got to get these kids off the video games. That was the big thing. Well, guess what? Now there's kids that play video games that are becoming drone pilots, and they're flying airplanes and designing games, and it's a sport in some places now. And so the whole game thing, they have learned that there are benefits to it with, hand-to-eye coordination, dexterity improvement, the ability to process information, things like that. But the reason I'm making this point is, even back then, you were truly competing with something to get a kid out of the house and into the outdoors. You were competing with a fantasy world of playing a video game. Now we've got an even bigger enemy, and that bigger enemy is called nothing. We are competing with nothing. Kids are perfectly comfortable having their phone in their hand, swipe, smile, laugh, chuckle, ha, 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 double tap, swipe, chuckle, laugh, comment, double tap, heart, emoji, blah, 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 shorthand, click, 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 move on. And what I mean by that is they're in the world of 7 to 9 second stimulation and moving on. So they're perfectly comfortable living vicariously through other people doing stuff and getting sucked into a world of doing nothing but that, living vicariously. When I was young, there was this movie that came out with Jane Fonda, right? And don't get me wrong, I'm not a Jane Fonda fan, but I watched this movie when I was a kid. I think it was called Barbarella or something like that, right? And it was so far-fetched that it was in outer space, and they would take a pill to experience things, right? Instead of having sex, they took a pill and they just looked at each other, and it was like they were having sex. Or they were hungry, so they just ate a pill and it fixed everything, and it was all the supplements they needed, and they didn't do anything anymore. And that was in, I don't know, probably the 70s, early 80s, and it just seemed so far-fetched and incomprehensible we could get to that as a society. Well, guess what? A little rectangular device called a mobile phone, it has become that pill. You don't have to do a damn thing anymore to experience it, or to get that dopamine hit to feel like you're experiencing it. And I think the whole tech neck thing and moving into that arena where we're competing with nothing is the thing. But we can't go, hey, look over here. You got to get on that phone and get in front of them so that you can stimulate them to want to do what you're doing, show them that it's attainable. The best, so people ask me all the time, what's your favorite episode of your TV show? Since you mentioned the TV show, I'm going to talk about that because it is my passion project, and it's how I make a living. It's actually how I finance doing the kayak bass fishing stuff, because that's still not, profitable. We shot for 3 days one time, and it was cold and it was windy, and I caught one fish in 3 days. And I'm not talking about I caught one fish in 3 days and I only fished a couple of hours and I didn't really give it all I had, and it is what, I grinded for 3 days. I hooked a fish and lost it, and I caught one fish. My producer goes, dude, what do you want to do with this episode? You want to just reshoot it at a different location? You want to wait till spring? I said, no, dude, let's run it. He's like, what? And he's like, man, your fans are going to have a visceral response to this one fish episode. I said, okay. But it's real. I want to share real. So we shot this episode. We put it together. He sends it to me and says, dude, are you sure you want to release this episode? Because it basically shows you on the struggle bus? And I was like, yes, I do. Okay, we release it. In the 3 years that episode was in constant rotation on the various platforms, on the various networks, we start off on one network as primary, and it goes to a secondary network and kind of off peak, and then it goes to a third network in syndication in 19 countries. In that 3-year life cycle of those episodes, I got one email where somebody said, dude, I can't believe you think you're some big fishing pro and you put out an episode. I got 22 minutes of my life I'll never get back because I watched you fish and catch one fish. Can't believe you did that. To date, I have about 3,500 emails, direct messages, or other types of connections, or people who've just walked up to me and said, dude, that episode where you grinded and you fished your butt off and you were freezing and you did this and you did that and you made adjustments and still only caught one fish. Man, I appreciate the fact that you put that out, because I watch TV a lot of times and get discouraged. I think, man, these guys are just going out there and catching fish every cast, and I go out there and try to do the same thing and I can't. So I appreciate you showing that and being real and all that. And that wasn't my intent. Honestly, normally I've got a pretty good crystal ball. I just wanted to show it because I wanted to be real. I didn't expect it to connect and resonate with people as some type of, like call to action, but it was weird. Like, people just resonated with people. I got one person who said it was BS and they never watching your show again, blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, well, you're watching it for the wrong reason then. If you just think you're just going to see fish porn and a bunch of hook sets and hell yes. But it really connected with the folks that said, thanks for sharing a real experience. Makes me feel more comfortable when I'm having a tough time. And now I'm going to do what you did. Take the lessons from that, realize that you should have changed the place, the preparation, or the presentation. One of those three things is the only thing you can really change in the fishing environment and be successful. Now, I did go back to that spot in the right season, under right weather, and I beat them up, punched them in the mouth, like knocked it out of the park. But I didn't even make an episode about that to go out and say, ha, ha, ha. It was for me. It was for me to go back out there and say, for myself, I'm kicking this lake's butt, right? But that's also kind of in that arena of doing tough stuff, being willing to put yourself out there for criticism. And ironically enough, I put myself out there for criticism and got more praise and adoration and respect out of it than I did the criticism that I was kind of like, you know what I mean? Like you throw something out there and you expect one thing, you're bracing for it, and it doesn't happen. And the next thing you know, people love it. So it was insane. I just haven't been able to articulate this uncomfortable thing for a long time. So it's a blessing to me that Gary asked me to do that, because it forced me to kind of look inward at a time when I was already doing some looking inward and needed to do some healing. And I realized this: I've got to do tough things to be fulfilled. I haven't been fulfilled for several years. And what's been missing is I got too soft, too fat, too lazy, and too comfortable. It really is that simple. You want to fix your mental health? Get hard. Because if you're hard, it's way harder for things to affect you. If you're kicking your own ass every day harder than anybody else can kick it, what are you afraid of? What is there to be afraid of? If you're criticizing yourself in your own call to action every day to get better than anybody else can ever criticize you, it ain't gonna sting when they say, dang, dude, you got fat. You already know. You're already doing something about it, right? So to me, the get uncomfortable thing is my new mantra, And what's funny is after that, my brain is a marketing brain. Like, that's how my brain works. But I want to put the you in uncomfortable. At the beginning, I'm gonna make a shirt that's got the you contrasted, and basically, you need to put the you in uncomfortable for yourself, and that's the only way you're going to be truly fulfilled. The only way you're going to be truly happy. The only way you're going to be truly successful. Yeah.
Chad, we're I guess needing to wrap up, those are some pretty, I could listen to you for a long time. Those are some interesting ways that you approach that, and really appreciate your time. Fascinating guy. Lots of different life experience, I think, that contribute to a cool story and unique experiences out there that I think people can learn from. And just even just kayak fishing, right? Like how long ago where nobody was really doing that, right? That's kind of unique. In my mind, I know some people who do it now, but it's not that, it's not that old. But anyway, we're going to wrap up. We appreciate you coming on, and we can't wait to share this one. We'll give you a chance here. Give us any final words. What should we take home?
Here's what I'll say. Obviously, I harped on the uncomfortable thing. Get out there and get uncomfortable. Challenge yourself. But more importantly, find yourself an accountability partner or an accountability buddy, somebody that can match your effort. You know what I'm saying? The one that I have is my son. Okay, when he was coming into his own as a young man, like that friction that normally ends up happening between a young man and a dad happened. We had 3 or 4 years where we disconnected. We weren't as good. But now I'm blessed with the opportunity to have him work for me full time. He is one of the best videographers that I know already and gets better every single day. We challenge each other every single day. And man, I'm going to be honest with you. I'm now a 47, about to be 48-year-old man trying to keep up with a 22-year-old. You want to get uncomfortable? Try to keep up with a young man who is motivated, who is fired up, who envisions himself being successful. Guide that young person's brain and their energy to help them avoid some of the pitfalls that you did. But at the same time, don't just steer them clear of every obstacle. And in some cases, even kick them, push them off into that pit so they got to dig out of that hole themselves, and realize you are doing them a favor. And Bill, you'll remember this from my speech, and I said this a long time ago. If you got a butt whooping at school, you got another one when you got home because your parents were reinforcing the authority of the school and saying, if you made them whoop your butt, I would have already have whooped your butt 3 dang times, so you're getting another one. So your kids are better off that way. Help them learn some lessons, but don't steer them clear of every obstacle. Don't steer them clear of every possible, struggle that they can go through, because you grow through what you go through. You don't grow through avoiding it. You grow through going through it. That's a old country thing that I've heard since I was, the tiniest thing out there. My grandpa used to say it. He used to say, grow through what you go through. And I remember being like 24 years old going, oh, dude, it was like a flash, an epiphany. He had another one where a bug used to hit the windshield, and he'd say, do it again if you had the guts. And I was like 14 before I figured that one out. I was like, oh, it's a double, it's a double entendre. His guts are smeared all over the windshield, and it's a courage thing. I get it. Ha ha ha. But again, I spent time with my grandpa so that wisdom could be passed on. He spent time with me so that wisdom could be passed on. And man, I'm just going to be straight with you. We just don't spend enough time with our families anymore. I'm guilty of it. I traveled too much. I was gone too much. I was chasing this pie in the sky thing with celebrity and having influence. I can only make a difference if I have influence. And I chased that too much. And the 1 or 2 or 3 people that you need to have the most influence on in your life are your kids or your spouse or your parents or, that inner circle, your closest 3 or 4 friends. Yeah, man, that's my final words, is to get out there and challenge and be challenged. If you don't have friends that are challenging you, you need new friends. Or you just need to light a fire into their butt so that they, iron sharpens iron, that whole thing. Yeah, that's really all it boils down to, man. And I'm not the smartest dude in the world that it took me to 48 years old to figure some of this stuff out, right? Just being real with you. So, yeah, just get out there and do some hard stuff, which is why I'm going to come see you next year and do some mountain elk hunting with the bow. Because to me, that's one of the ultimate accomplishments in the outdoor game, is to put yourself on the most uneven playing field in the world and find success. And even if you don't, being on the field means you were in the game.
Love it. What about you, Big Bill? Send us out.
I'm going to kind of go with the same tone. And we talk all the time about, conservation and sportsmen needing to get engaged in conservation, learn about it, and make their voice heard. So I'm going to challenge all of those listening to look at your friends and family who you hunt and fish with and who hunt and fish. Push them to get involved and to learn more. And part of it is getting new people into hunting and fishing. That is a conservation issue. So whether it's getting new people involved or learning more about conservation and getting engaged in your area, I'll challenge people to do that and hold your friends accountable and have them hold you accountable to doing it as well.
Well, thanks, Bill. I appreciate those words too. A lot of people don't know a lot about conservation. It's hard to figure it out, but just like we said, if you do something hard, you're going to come out the other side in a really good spot. Thanks for the conversation, gentlemen. Hope you're going to get out in the field here soon. It's that great time of year. All the seasons are starting and good stuff. So enjoy the listen, folks, and get out in the woods. Take care.
For more great content, check out NWF Outdoors social media on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter.
Connect with us. We want to hear from you. Send us your ideas for podcast guests and questions in the comments.
We are NWF Outdoors.